ushindi kwa ukombozi wetu. Tujitoe wenyewe, tusimame pamoja kulinda uhuru na umoja wetu. Enyi Bwana na binti wa Afrika, mwili wa jua, mwili wa anga, tuifanye Afrika mti wa uzima. Tuungane sote, tuimbe pamoja, kuenzi shikamano hatima yetu. Tujitoe wenyewe kupambana pamoja, uhuru na umoja vitawale. Enyi Bwana na binti wa Afrika, mwili wa jua, mwili wa anga, tuifanye Afrika mti wa uzima. Tuungane sote na tujibidishe kutoa kilicho bora kwa Afrika. Chimbuko la wanadamu, chemchemi ya utamaduni, tumaini letu wakati wa mafarakano. Enyi Bwana na binti wa Afrika, mwili wa jua, mwili wa anga, tuifanye Afrika mti wa uzima.
Good evening to those who are in Southern Africa, and good morning, good afternoon to those in different time zones. Welcome again to our program, What I Show. We encourage you to subscribe to us on YouTube and Facebook at Humanist TV Africa, so that you won't miss any program. And if you think we can improve, or if you have any complaints about us, or if you want anything from us, you can email us at info@humanisttvafrica.com or WhatsApp us on the number shown on the screen. And on Sunday, we had the What I Show, and the topic was slave trade, colonization, modern day Scramble for Africa, and Vision 2030. We thought that we did not exhaust the topic, so we thought to do a part 2 of the same very topic, where we be discussing around those issues with the Honorable Taurai Kandishaya of Zimbabwe, who is also from the ZANU-PF party, the ruling party in Zimbabwe. He is the deputy National Youth Commissar in the ZANU-PF. So to just recap what we discussed with him last week, and he said that slave trade and colonization is just a it was just a continuation, but a change of name. When I asked him, is his party or the government of Zimbabwe, are they in any position of demanding reparations from those who are beneficiaries of slave trade and colonization? He actually advised us that we should be aware that we might lose what we have, trying to gain what we have lost already. So in short, he was saying we are concentrating on today and the future. In short, he was saying, let the bygones be bygones, and let us start anew. Let us not concentrate much on what we've lost, unless we will lose what we are having. So in other words, we discussed well the slave trade, the colonization. So it was the time that we should actually discuss the modern day scramble for Africa, and probably we are going also to discuss about Vision 2030, which is the vision of the ZANU-PF party and the government of Zimbabwe in general. So you'll be telling the viewers what actually do they mean when they say Vision 2030. And also, I think today we started continuing from modern day Scramble for Africa, where I challenged him and say the African states were actually in Italy recently, 2 weeks back. And I think a number of countries are doing the same. They're inviting African countries to come and negotiate with them, whether it's Russia, it's China, it's Italy, it's France, it's United States, it's the United Kingdom. It seems there's what we call modern day scramble for Africa. The scramble for Africa during colonial era was about Europeans coming to negotiate with the traditional leaders here in Africa. Now it's about those countries inviting our leaders to their respective countries. So I'm discussing this topic with my guest, Honorable Kantishaya. I
Yes,
think
sir.
you just in short, just remind the people who you are and who is Taurai Kantishaya. Probably some of them missed the program last time, or they might have forgotten. Over to you, Honorable.
Thank you so much. I am Comrade Taurai Kandishaya, the ZANU-PF Youth League Deputy National Political Commissar and ZANU-PF Member of Parliament for Epworth North constituency. I am also a Pan-Africanist.
Thank you very much. And we are glad to hear that you are a Pan-Africanist. This TV station is a Pan-Africanist TV station. It is guided by humanistic values and Pan-African values. And trust me, in 2 weeks' time, we are going to have Dr. Lazarus Dokora discussing about African education vis-a-vis African Agenda 2063. So it will sound as a continuation. Last time I asked you your thoughts on this scramble for Africa. We see a number of countries that are trying to get signatures of different African states, that are trying to do business with different African states, especially countries from Asia and countries from Europe. Recently, our leaders, our presidents from Africa were in Italy. And Italy, I think it was the first time Italy tried to engage. And can you recap for us? I heard you saying you are doing what we call diplomatic whatsoever and trying to lower in capital.
Well, thank you so much, my brother. I think there's no problem when we look for investment, we look for capital. It's an undisputable fact that Africa has resources. But because of the colonial legacies, we were left underdeveloped by these Westerners who came and looted almost everything. This is to say that we have the resources. What we need is capital. And the capital is usually in the hands of the capitalists, the former colonizers. So when our leaders visit America, China, Russia, Italy, United Kingdom, European countries, what we are looking for are investments. They go there to notify the world, we have this, we have lithium in our country. But remember, when these investors come, they do not bring capital with conditions. In as much as capital goes where it feels safe, they bring capital and they are made to comply with our compliant rules of doing business. If we say you don't export raw materials that you mine here, establish a plant so that you process and maybe produce products so that the country is able to export finished products against this phenomenon of exporting raw materials. So it's not, that is not Scramble for Africa. When the Westerners are hunting for the signatures of Africans, they are indirectly admitting that the resources are only in Africa. They do not have resources. All they have is capital. We know that the capital that they have was looted from Africa. The best way to get back that money is to enter into agreements, partnerships, win-win engagements, where they win, we also win. That is trade. We are now much focused on economic diplomacy, engagement and re-engagement. In the case of Zimbabwe, the policy that came with President Emmerson Mnangagwa when he took over reins of power in 2017 to say we are a friend to all and an enemy to none. That does not mean we are opening doors for colonization. We are against neocolonialism. We are against imperialism. That's why we say land reform is irreversible. If there is a foreigner who wants to invest in agriculture, there are some partnerships that will be made with the government. For example, in the past 2 years, I think you witnessed John Deere, an American company, coming to Zimbabwe with its tractors, the farming implements, the farming equipment. That is not bad at all. Remember, the private companies in the Europeans and the American soils are also blaming their governments for imposing sanctions on Zimbabwe and on African countries. Because when sanctions are imposed, it means those private companies are also restricted from trading. Therefore, if you are into business, international business, global business, establishments, you cannot be confined to certain markets as opposed to other markets. Africa is, I think, is one of the biggest markets with over 1 billion people, 1 billion buyers, billion partners. So this means that we need them as business partners. They also need us as business partners. We are past the stage where they think they can control us and loot our resources willy-nilly.
Thank you very much. And you said Africa is underdeveloped because of some of the colonial legacies. And some of those colonial legacies we still have today, and we still respect those colonial legacies, are boundaries we have as countries. And do you think we should keep the boundaries, or we should have a borderless Africa? Because these boundaries are actually unnatural and the colonial legacy. If we take, for example, a country like Zimbabwe, if you go where it has a border with Botswana, you find the Kalanga people on the Zimbabwean side, you find the Kalanga people on the Botswana side. You go the same on the boundary of Zambia and Zimbabwe. You find the Tonga people on the other side. You find the Tonga people on the Zimbabwean side too. You go to Mozambique, you go even to South Africa and Zimbabwe. You find the Venda people in South Africa, the Venda people in Zimbabwe, which means these boundaries were unnatural and they didn't care about that. They were dividing natural demarcation. So, but surprisingly, the way we as Africans, the way we actually respect those borders, the way we closely guard those borders, some of the borders have razor wire, some of those borders are heavily guarded by the army, some of those borders, we actually revere those borders, and we need documents to cross those borders. And if you look at Europe, what they do, it's easier to move. If a person is European, you can move from France to UK without difficulties. And you find in Africa, you need to have a passport to cross into Botswana, to cross into Zambia. Is it not enough to just say you are a fellow Zimbabwean, you can cross into Zimbabwe from Zambia, from Mozambique, whatsoever? We are still respecting those colonial legacies. And you find that, you saw when we started this program, we normally have that anthem in Kiswahili. Swahili is the widely spoken local language in Africa. Why also don't we use Kiswahili as the official language? You find that Africa is divided on the lines of who colonized them. Those who were colonized by the Portuguese, they're called the Lusophone. Those who were colonized by the French, they're called the Francophone. Those who were colonized by the British, they're called the Anglophone. If you see, these legacies really are still with us. And it seems, is there anything you are doing, probably as the ZANU-PF party or the government of Zimbabwe, in trying to abolish all these borders?
Thank you so much, my brother. We are generally against the idea of becoming extremists when we are dealing with sovereignties and issues of borders. I must admit to the fact that the borders are artificial, they were imposed by the Westerners whatsoever. But remember, even before the borders, we had territories. What's important now for Africa is that we are agreeing as Africa to sign for the Africa Free Trade Area, where Africa intends to promote trade within Africa. You all know what our president, Comrade Emerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, says. He says in Shona, nyika inovakwa nevanhu vayo. A country is built by its own. The same applies to Africa. Africa is built by its own. So Africa Free Trade Area Agreement simply means that there should be trade amongst Africans. If Zimbabwe is producing product X, Mauritania should be able to buy from Zimbabwe. Not this attitude where an African country can promote European or Asian markets or Asian business. So the only way we do away with borders, the only way we can speak one language, I cannot subscribe to the fact that entire Africa should be speaking Swahili or Shona or whatever language, or Fenda or Nambia. But I subscribe and I move a notion that Africa should speak one language. The language should be love, unity, and solidarity. When there is love, what Zimbabwe speaks is what South Africa echoes, is what Senegal says, is what Egypt supports. Because you remember that when Zimbabwe took land in 1999, at one point we were left isolated, including some few SADC member states. They were against Zimbabwe for fear of victimization by the Westerners. Right now, people are discovering that Zimbabwe did good, and now it's too late for them, to imitate what Zimbabwe did. So what we need is to speak an African universal language, which is love, which is peace, which is solidarity. An attack to one must be an attack to all. An injury to one must be an injury to all. Even Jesus Christ, when he was preaching, he said, there are many body parts in one body. And you know, when you are walking, and for those who grew up in the rural areas, you are walking barefoot, you are heading your father's cattle, and you step on a thorn. The thorn pierces you under the feet. It is not the feet that cries, but it is the mouth. Few minutes later, you see the hands trying to unplug the thorn, and the eyes are looking. But it's not the eyes that are pierced, it's not the hands that are pierced. But what does that mean? The mouth, the nose, the eyes, the hands knows that we are one. An injury to the leg, if the leg fails to walk, then it means that we are deprived of certain privileges, like food. You need to walk so that you get food. You need hands so that you eat. So what we need to do as Africa is to speak one language and to remove borders in the sense of trade and movement. Recently, you witnessed the President Emerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa when he was in Botswana with our beloved father and brother, Comrade Masisi. They agreed that there should be no need for passports when Zimbabweans are crossing to Botswana, when the Botswana people are crossing into Zimbabwe. I think the same happened between Botswana and Namibia. You know that there used to be a visa requirement for a Zimbabwean to visit South Africa. It was scrapped. You know that if you want to go to Mozambique at times, you need a gate pass. All those things. What we need to do is to remove the borders in our minds. If you are Zimbabwean, know that you are also Mozambican. Know that you are also Rwandese. Know that you are also Congolese. Know that you are also a Moroccan. Know that you are also an Egyptian. In the idea of uplifting the lives of Africans, to make sure, as I said in the previous interview, that the richest, person in an African country must be an African. The most famous and successful musician in an African land must be an African. This is the idea. So we must remove the borders in our minds. We must remove borders in our trade. We must remove borders when it comes to limitations in terms of how far you relate as Africans. These are the only borders that we should have. The language that we should speak is peace, love, and solidarity. Like now, I am happy with the situation when SADC started to stand in solidarity with Zimbabwe, calling for unconditional removal of illegal sanctions imposed on Zimbabwe. And, African Union also supported it. Ended up at United Nations, almost everybody is saying, no, remove illegal sanctions against Zimbabwe. This means we no longer have borders. Because if Zimbabweans suffer, if there are no good roads in Zimbabwe as a result of sanctions, this affects South Africa's trade. Because Zimbabwe is the central or the link point of entire SADC. One is coming from Malawi to South Africa, is via Zimbabwe. Zambia to South Africa is via Zimbabwe. South Africa to DRC is via Zimbabwe. South Africa to Malawi is via Zimbabwe. To Tanzania it's also via Zimbabwe. So let's remove borders in the sense that we are one people. We speak African language, which is peace, love, and solidarity. We speak one language that we need African solutions to African problems. Africa is only built by its own people.
Thank you very much. And you also mentioned earlier on in your submission that when people they come to invest in Africa, they should abide with the African laws or the laws in the countries where they are investing in. And we have at some point, I think I asked you before, I don't remember, we have some point where Chinese are accused of not following the local rules, labor rules, where they are said they are being either abusing the workers and what. Then another issue is, you mentioned also earlier that land reform is irreversible. But there was 2 years ago in the Zimbabwean budget where some amount of money was set aside to compensate those who lost their land during land reform or whatsoever. Is that not a form of reversing land reform?
Oh, thank you so much. There is this propaganda about Chinese investors that is being peddled and spearheaded by the Westerners who lost an opportunity to invest in Zimbabwe because of their wayward behavior, their general attitude of wanting to grab and to loot, to colonize and to undermine. What do I mean here? Entire mining industry was occupied by the British, the Australians, and the Americans. And when we took back our land, when we took back what legally belongs to us, they were angry. They imposed sanctions on Zimbabwe. The sanctions did not only affect Zimbabwe, they also affected them. And it was now time for us to look east and say, our friends, you assisted us during the liberation struggle. You armed us during the liberation struggle up until we defeated the enemy. We defeated the colonialists. We are back. Let's proceed. So now, because we are having the Chinese coming to Zimbabwe to enter into partnerships, to negotiate business, not to bully Zimbabweans, Westerners are discovering that they are losing a lot. My brother, you remember well that we have been seeing videos of black Zimbabweans abusing fellow black Zimbabweans. Abuse of workers is not a belief or a policy of the Chinese. Abuse of workers and underpaying workers is not a belief of Zimbabweans. But we have seen black on black abusing each other. We have also seen the whites. I will tell you this, before the Chinese, under the British influence, we had our women being abused, being underpaid. They were not given even the maternity leave. Maybe a black person would graduate with an accounts degree. That black person will be employed as an accounts clerk. And a diploma holder or a certificate holder, a white person, will be the manager. So a degreed person will then be reporting to a certificate holder Why? Based on racial lines, based on complexion. So the Chinese are doing everything. I want to applaud the Chinese for the donation that they made to Zimbabwe at the time we need when COVID-19 attacked us. Remember, we are the country that received the least number of COVID-19 related deaths as Zimbabwe. It is the Chinese. A friend of that caliber is what we need. A friend who is not conditional. A friend who avails yourself when you are at your weakest. So this is the propaganda against the Chinese companies. The Chinese have done a lot. You look at the Acadia lithium mine, you look at the Bikita mine, you look at everything that they are doing. Recently, they donated, ammunition to us. This is good. So the Americans, the Europeans are, sponsoring propaganda against the Chinese investors. But look, the Build Road Initiative, BRI, the Chinese infrastructural investment policy, is now in Australia. It's even there in some countries in America. It's there in the European countries. To the extent that America had to come up with the B3W, bring back better world policy. European Union had to come up with a global gateway. But you cannot trust B3W, you cannot trust GG the same way you can trust BRI because of the colonial legacies. You cannot trust the Westerners, they are not genuine. So we must not be led into attacking Chinese investments when in actual fact they have assisted us in a bigger way. We had, we had scandals at the diamonds there when De Beers, an American company, was mining. Right now, President Masisi in Botswana had to sit down with the De Beers to say, you comply or you move away, because they were taking 100% of the diamonds. That was so bad. Now at least it's on 50-50. It's a process they are negotiating. So we must not attack the Chinese. The Chinese are being attacked politically, not economically.
All right, thank you. So in other words, Honorable, you are saying Zimbabwe or Africa is finding itself as a fighting ground where the Westerners are fighting the Chinese. So probably in our own language in Shona, we say panorwa mikono chinokuvara isora raipapo, which means when the bulls are fighting, the grass suffers. And what are we going to do as the grass not to suffer? The ZANU-PF government normally talks of Vision 2030. I'm sure a number of people don't understand what the government of Zimbabwe mean when they say Vision 2030. They say vision of upper and middle income economy, which is actually what President Mnangagwa normally says. I think in short or in brief, can you tell us what the Zimbabwean government or what ZANU-PF mean by Vision 2030? Yes, we heard you say the president is saying Nyika inovakwa nevenevai, which means the country is built by its owners. I think there is $1 million question, who is Mwene? Because there is some polarization in Zimbabwe where some people they think is that the other people who are more Zimbabweans than the other. And I think in clarifying Vision 2030, you shall position all Zimbabweans in a particular context. Are we all equal Zimbabweans? Is there someone who is second class Zimbabwean? Over to you. I see you're itching to speak.
Yeah, Vision 2030. Vision 2030 is very simple. The president aimed to create an upper middle income economy by 2030. This has been necessitated by the introduction of the TSP. We now have the National Development Strategy 1, NDS 1, where we are developing infrastructure with our own resources. We are revamping or resuscitating our agricultural sector using our own resources. Last year, but one, we had a wheat bumper harvest, a record-breaking one. that overtook the one that was done, I think, in the 1960s. We are no longer importing wheat. We are no longer importing maize. We are doing good. We are developing. When COVID-19 started, we were importing medical gas from other countries. But during the era of COVID-19, the president, in the spirit of Vision 2030, of wanting to create an upper middle income economy by 2030, made sure that the government finances establishment of a medical gas manufacturing plant in Mtare, which is manufacturing at least 600 tons of medical gas per month, whereas our nation requires only 150 tons of medical gas for local use. And we are now exporting more than 450 tons of medical gas. You also saw Zimbabwe donating vaccines, COVID-19 vaccines, to Namibia. You also saw South Africans coming to be vaccinated in Zimbabwe. You witnessed the Parliament of Canada, the MPs in Canada, appreciating and acknowledging the government's efforts in vaccinating its population. So this is the creation of the upper middle income economy, where hospitals are being equipped on daily basis, where ambulance, we now have even the helicopters, where agriculture is now back, where mining is now, supporting our economy. You remember that when we took back our land, the whites had to close mines, an act of sabotage. But right now we are back to mining. We are having millions of tons of gold. We are now exporting our gold. We also introduced the gold coins. Our currency is now backed by gold. We now have the gold reserves. We are now in the process of building mineral laboratories. We want to process our minerals. The mineral laboratory is under construction at Joshua Nkomo University in Rwanda. I think it's now 95 or 96% towards completion. You also know that we are doing diamond cutting and diamond polishing. The president also challenged lithium mining companies to establish processors and also to manufacture batteries, so that we also sell batteries out there. We don't export raw materials. In the agricultural sector, there's also value addition. In Mutoko, there's a plant there for processing of tomatoes. We make tomato puree, we make tomato sauce. In Wonde Valley, there's a plan to construct a banana processing plant. We now have the banana snakes, the crisps. We are doing quite a lot. We are also reopening the fabric manufacturing companies, because we are producing wheat here in Zimbabwe. We are doing quite a number of things in the agricultural sector. There is an ongoing massive dam construction, which is I will give you an example of the Guaishangani Dam, which was pegged around 1964. Ian Smith and the Rhodesians failed to construct the dam. It was started recently, and I think now it's 75 to 85% towards completion. It's actually a lake that will promote irrigation in the dry regions of Matabeleland. If you go towards the Plumtree area, people are now producing wheat from the desert sands, and they are on government payroll for producing wheat, and they also sell the wheat to the government. There is also a dam construction at Kunzi, the dam that will do away with Harare water shortages. There was also another dam in Macheka. There's also another dam in Bowera. What we are doing is, because of climate change, we may fail to receive enough rainfall, but we must continue farming through irrigation, mechanization. Belarus came as our friend as a result of engagement and re-engagement. President Idi Mnangagwa engaged Belarus. They are bringing in state-of-the-art agricultural equipment so that we strengthen two backbones of our economy, which is agriculture and mining. But we move a step further towards value addition and beneficiation. This is processing. We also need to be producing the products and to stop importing finished products. You also know that when President Idi Mnangagwa came to power in 2017, we had 75% of our food products in the supermarket shelves were imports. But right now we are at 85% local produce versus 15% imports. What does that mean? The GDP is starting to balance. We are now producing cooking oil, we are producing soap. That was affected when Lever Brothers was placed under illegal sanctions, and quite a number of companies. Zisco Steel was also placed under sanctions. It was the Africa's biggest steel plant, steel manufacturing plant. But we are now opening Manize in Chivu. Manize will cover the gap that was left by Zisco Steel. So this is what we call an upper middle income economy by 2030, where Zimbabwe will be back on the international market, where Zimbabwe will have gained back its breadbasket status. Right now, we are exporting, we are the biggest exporter of mulberries to the United Kingdom. We are even exporting beef. We are exporting quite a lot. There are people who are keeping goats in Zimbabwe, goats and roadrunner chickens. You will find those in Dubai. You find those in United Kingdom. You find those in Australia. We are doing quite well. So for those who say they are first-class citizens in Zimbabwe, I must remind you that almost everybody in Zimbabwe is into farming. I am happy and proud to say that when it comes to land allocation, the land reform, it was done in a political manner, to the extent that our beloved, dear departed brother, Comrade Morgan Tsvangirai, died with a farm. Comrade, Tendai Biti has a farm. Comrade Wolfman Muwe is one of the biggest beef suppliers in the country. He has a farm that he did not buy, but he benefited from land reform program. With Comrade Job Scala, he has a farm. Comrade Nelson Chamisa has a farm. We had the likes of wayward journalists like Wopo Wachimono benefiting from the agricultural initiatives that are being spearheaded by the government. So allocation of land and mining is not political. But what happens is that in the spirit of wanting to divide Zimbabwe, the whites are making sure that they create narratives to divide Zimbabweans. But look, the opposition leaders are benefiting from the initiatives of the government, but they go to the electorate and say, please do not get yourself involved in Fumvudza, because it belongs to ZANU-PF. If you are seen standing in a queue to receive maize seeds, you are labeled a sellout in the opposition camp. But at night, the leaders are benefiting. At times, they benefit during the day. So we are a unitary state. We are united. We are diverse and we differ in opinion. But when it comes to the core values that makes up a country called Zimbabwe, we are okay.
Thank you very much. And you have actually mentioned an interesting issue about the hypocrisy of the opposition in Zimbabwe. I remember Munyaradzi Gwisai was actually recalled from parliament, and some of the reasons was he was supporting the issue that the opposition people should actually partake in the land reform, while the opposition was saying we are not partaking in the land reform issue. I'm also surprised to hear that a number of leaders in the opposition, you said they actually benefited from land reform and they have farms. So, and I wonder, why are they doing this? I think it would be best in the next program to have someone from the opposition and yourself, so that we hear the reasons why some of the leaders in the opposition can say something during the day, and during the evening they benefit the farms as you claimed, so that they can talk on this. Because I didn't know that the likes of Job Scala, the likes of Nelson Chamisa, the likes of Tendai Bit, we have farms. Of course, I once heard about Professor Washman Ngube having a farm and doing a beef project. For these other guys, I am just hearing it now. And you mentioned the issue of that the plant in Mutare is actually producing medical gases, which are more than enough for the country. But do you remember the artist Gary Mapanzure, who actually involved in the road accident somewhere in Masvingo? And it is said that when he arrived at the hospital, he died because there was no oxygen. How do you connect the two? When the country maybe not being transported in time to other provinces?
Okay, I told you that we received the least number of COVID-19 related deaths. And we last imported medical gas at the early stages of COVID-19. It is the Mtare gas that saved the population of Zimbabwe. We did not have those, what do you call them, the machines, what do you call them, those that were used during COVID-19 to breathe.
Ventilators.
The ventilators. And the president, through the government, sponsored and assisted Harare Institution of Technology, HIT, to produce the ventilators. The gas was coming from Tare, the ventilators were coming from HIT. So, but we cannot use an example of death of an individual person to nullify a plant that saved millions and millions of Zimbabwe. There are quite a number of issues that contributed, that were said on the death of our beloved brother, Comrade Gary Mapanzo, who was also part of us. He was a youth just like us. He was patriotic. He loved his RPF so much. But they say that the mechanism that was in the available ambulance in Manicaland was overpowered by the condition. So is that his condition deteriorated so fast that the ambulance was incapacitated. The only ambulance that could offer the service was coming from Harare. The rest is history. We cannot, send our discussion on the death of our departed brother. But what I'm telling you is there are huge improvements. Recently, you saw our Minister of Finance, Comrade Mtuli, a political member, being awarded as the best finance minister in Africa. The award was handed to him by a British organization. You saw some European think tanks acknowledging that Zimbabwe is the fastest growing economy in Africa. Indeed, it is. When transport challenges, the government purchased the buses from Belarus, subsidized transport was availed, and we do not have transport problems in Zimbabwe. Roads construction, because for us to qualify into the Africa Free Trade Area Agreement, we need good road networking. If you go to Bedbridge border post, they upgrade the border to reduce queues and to improve efficiency. If you go to Robert Mugabe International Airport, the way it was expanded and extended, and now we have a direct flight to Mozambique, a direct flight to Dubai, direct flight to Swaziland, direct flight to South Africa, direct flights to quite a number of countries. And other, airlines are coming, showing, an expression of interest to have their flights in Zimbabwe. Air Zimbabwe is also buying planes. Recently, we received another one. This is the creation of an upper middle income economy by 2030. But the steps that we have moved so far, 2030 is far. And even now, when you look at the improvement in terms of pass rate, when COVID-19 came, we were down, but the president worked 24/7 to guarantee free Wi-Fi to schools. E-learning was promoted, and we are doing quite well. Right now, we are moving towards, revamping, our stadiums so that we promote our soccer games. We admit that the situation had gone bad, and at times it's not because of the central government, it's because of the local government, because quite a number of stadiums are under the control of the opposition. And when genuine partners offered to rebuild and to renovate the stadiums to meet the CAF standards, the council denied for political reasons. So they are the Westerners who are sponsoring a divisive agenda to undermine democracy and development in Zimbabwe, so that people will say Smith was even better. But how was Smith better when he left one university for 100 years? The Rhodesians, the white minority rule, the dictatorship rule, left only one university in Zimbabwe. As we are speaking right now, we have more than 14 state universities accompanied by other private universities. What a development. There were no provincial hospitals then. We now have provincial hospitals. We now have district hospitals. We now have, clinics all over. This is what we call development.
All right. Thank you very much. And how do you reconcile the two? For example, you mentioned that Professor Mutuli Ngube got an award from some think tanks in the UK. And since we are talking about colonialism, I personally think that when the Westerners, as we discussed earlier, when they give prizes to our leaders, can we try to think about the interest behind the award? For example, the former president, Comrade Robert Gabriel Mugabe, was once knighted by the United Kingdom to be called a sir. And when you are united, it means somehow you are defending their interests. And I think the British people, they are very smart when it comes to defend their interests. You said you are a pan-Africanist, and I want to give you a finished example of how some of our leaders in Africa can also become victims. I think you know Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah, the former president of Ghana, wanted to pull out from Commonwealth, and in 1958, the Queen, the late Queen Elizabeth II, wanted to visit Ghana, but unfortunately she fell pregnant, and according to the royal rules, she couldn't visit Ghana. She then visited in 1962, and she did something which was not done before, dancing on the stage with Kwame Nkrumah. Then he had a meeting with Kwame Nkrumah afterward that we can differ, but don't pull out from the Commonwealth, of which I think, yes, the Zimbabwean government is trying to go back into the Commonwealth, which is also a form of neo-colonialism, a form of being under the control of the British people. You know what happens when the Queen went back to, that was in 1962, when the Queen went back to UK after leaving Ghana, it is said that MacDonald, the Prime Minister of UK by then, phoned Kennedy, who was the president of America by then, said, I have sacrificed my queen. You should sacrifice your man. And what America did in return, they sponsored the building of the biggest dam in Ghana, that is called Volta Dam. So which means McDonald said, I sacrificed my queen to go and dance with a black person, which was not so favorable because of racism. And Kennedy sponsored the building of Volta Dam. And that was the end of Kwame Nkrumah. He then started to be soft towards the West. And what followed, it is said that a coup was sponsored to overthrow him, and that was the end of the vibrant ideas of Pan-Africanism from our beloved father, Kwame Nkrumah. So, do you really trust the awards which Professor Mutuli Ngube got from those Western think tanks? Don't you think it's a trap?
Thank you, my brother. Look here. You must agree that Zimbabwe collapsed the United States and the EU jointly. The step that Zimbabwe took of taking back its land was never done by any other country. From 1999, 2000, 2001, Americans imposed sanctions in Zimbabwe. They had to make the sanctions a law in their own country, the Zidera, to punish Zimbabwe, thinking that Zimbabwe will then kneel down and submit. We did not submit. They tried to remove ZANU-PF from power, sponsoring the likes of the late Morgan Tsvangirai. He saw arrest in accordance to what he did for Zimbabweans. They tried everything. Now they realize that Zimbabwe will never be a colony again. The only way to get to Zimbabwe is by negotiations and becoming business partners in honesty and sincerity. So the award is not meant to advance neo-colonialism. In my thinking, it's an admission and a surprise and a shock. Because I caught one of the British MPs in Parliament when he said, no, it's now easier to recolonize Zimbabwe, given that COVID-19 will wipe away everyone. They will die like flies. After COVID-19, people did not die like flies. Actually, in Britain and America, Italy, Spain, those countries, people died like flies as a result of COVID-19. And they are surprised, they are actually shocked. So this is simply an admission. And we are not, what happens to Comrade Nkrumah? The revolution of Zimbabwe is not is not by speech. It's not a theoretical revolution. The revolution of Zimbabwe is a practical one, my brother. We took back our land. We are safeguarding our sovereignty. We are continuing with our independence. We are safeguarding our territorial integrity. And we are upholding the freedom that came as a result of the liberation struggle. Unlike the theories that our first Pan-Africanists were doing, the likes of I always quote Malema when he's undermining and attacking the late Comrade Mandela. Of course, he was good at some point, but at some point there were theoretical movements. The movement of Zimbabwe is not by theory. It's one movement that led, for the first time in history, America and EU to combine sanctions. I think so far we are the only country. Maybe the next country was Russia. They recently received sanctions from both. We were sanctioned by America and Britain jointly, America and EU jointly. Why? Because we took a bold step. So when it comes to Zimbabwe, the British did not do what they did to Kwame Nkrumah. They even tried to stage a quarter, Comrade Robert. They tried to stage one of Comrade Robert Gabriel Mugabe. Comrade Mbeki said in his presentation that the British had already deployed soldiers along the Limpopo belt to attack Zimbabwe after land reform. They tried to sponsor coups. They tried to sponsor opposition parties. At one point, the Zimbabwe main opposition was the richest political party in the continent, trying to remove Comrade Robert Mugabe. But we showed them that we have Zimbabwean solutions to Zimbabwean problems. When it was time for Comrade Mugabe to retire, he was advised and challenged by Zimbabweans. Not only Zimbabweans, but from within ZANU-PF to say, our beloved father, thank you so much for the service. What's your thought? He said, I'm now going to resign. So they've tried coup in Zimbabwe. They've attempted assassinations from 1980. They tried assassinations on our beloved president, Comrade E.D. Mnangagwa. They tried to sentence him. They tried all sorts of things. But when it comes to Zimbabwe, they've raised their hands up to say we have surrendered. So the award is truly an appreciation of the efforts that Zimbabwe is putting, because our currency is not losing value the way they expected. Our currency is gaining ground. We are also managing to mobilize gold, because when they closed the mines, the government, in the spirit of black empowerment, said we must not call people illegal miners. We must call them artisanal miners, so that they mine gold and sell to Fidelity. Fidelity buys gold on behalf of the government. When Fidelity buys gold, we are now boosting our reserves. If you look at Britain, they boast with gold reserves of the gold that they do not have. There is not even a single gold mine in Britain. Gold is taken from this country. Now we are building our own resources. That is bringing some stability in our economy. That is bringing developments, infrastructural developments that we are doing with our own monies, without borrowing. We now have, what do you call it? An excess in terms of budget, but there's a word that I'm now forgetting. We now have everything. We are doing our things. We are building. We are rebuilding. We are expanding. We are extending. We are just doing good.
Thank you very much, and I like your openness, and I like the way that you are open to talk to everyone. In our next show, and that is probably the what I saw on Sunday. I think we have to bring the person from the opposition that they will answer certain questions. You talk that time. We need love. We need unity. So probably, if you look at Zimbabwe, there is a lot of polarization. So we can try to see whether what you are saying is truly what is on the ground we hear from those who are in the opposition circles. And anyway, time is jealous, but I think it's Viola Nyamyalo from Uganda who actually asked, can the honorable member tell us who owns the larger? They say, can the MP tell us how many Zimbabwean own land today in terms of numbers compared to foreigners and Caucasian settlers? By Caucasian settlers, she meant whites. So I think, in short, the honorable and also the deputy National Youth Commissar can just say the final words in 2 minutes, if it's still available. In 2 minutes, then we conclude the program. Can you say your final words in 2 minutes? Then we conclude the program where we are waiting for the next program where I will have to bring a person from the opposition side to also represent the opposition, where you represent the ZANU-PF and the government. So in 2 minutes, are you getting me now? Are you? Hello, honorable. Hello, honorable. Unfortunately, I think the honorable is not getting me. But anyway, it was my pleasure to have him. Are you now getting me, honorable? Am I audible now? Hello, honorable. All right. Thank you very much for watching, and you shall meet him again when we will bring someone from the opposition of Zimbabwe. We were talking to the Honorable Comrade Taurai Kandishaya of ZANU-PF, and surely is one of the high-ranked people in the Youth Assembly of the ruling party, ZANU-PF. We thank him for his time, and he will be with us again. So thank you, viewers, for being with us. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube and on Facebook too at Humanist TV Africa, so that you won't miss any program when we go live. And you can also write to us, info@humanisttvafrica.com, or you can get hold of us on WhatsApp. Be safe, and we shall meet again in another Hot Eyes show. Always your host, Kawia Chinama of Zimbabwe.